Have you ever wondered what happens when a man walks into a lion's den, not with a weapon, but with the very claws the beasts thought they'd hidden away? Can you believe that a single voice could make an entire system tremble? Not by shouting, but by whispering the truth? Picture a cold morning in Washington, D.C., where the heavy wooden doors of a federal courthouse swing shut, meant to seal away a secret no one expected to see the light of day. Then Elon Musk steps in. No tie, no pretense, just a gray suit and a half smile that says he's already 3 moves ahead. That day, he didn't just testify. He turned that room into an arena where the rules were flipped, where the shackled became the one cracking the whip. You won't look away, because this isn't just a story about a hearing. It's about how one man forced the world to listen. The air inside the federal courthouse was frigid, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and muffles every sound against the gray stone walls. This was supposed to be a closed-door affair, a procedural testimony, a formality where questions were asked and answers were tightly controlled. But when Elon Musk walked in, his footsteps echoed off the marble floor like drumbeats heralding a storm. He wore a simple gray suit, no tie, his hair slightly tousled from the morning breeze. His eyes, deep, piercing, swept the room, sizing up every shadow, every gaze fixed on him. Inside, a strange feeling stirred, not fear, but something closer to curiosity laced with defiance. They thought they could bind him with rules they'd written themselves. They were wrong. He'd spent weeks, months, preparing, not to defend, but to strike. In his hands were documents, fragments of a story the government had buried under the dust of national security. He knew this wasn't just about him or X. It was bigger, about the right to speak, to hear, to know. The room was packed. Journalists crammed together, pens poised, eyes gleaming like wolves hungry for a scoop. Lawmakers whispered among themselves, glances thick with skepticism. A few tech lobbyists watched from the back, silent as ghosts waiting for their moment. A young reporter, hair slick with sweat, muttered to a colleague, "They think they can box Musk in with courtroom protocol. They've clearly never met him." The words hung in the air, a prophecy no one dared believe. Judge Harold Bannister entered, precise as a clock striking the hour. He was a stern man, silver-haired, with narrow eyes like a blade's edge. His reputation rested on meticulous rulings and a no-nonsense demeanor, a man who didn't like being challenged, let alone outmaneuvered. He took his seat, tapped his gavel lightly, and his deep voice rumbled, "Mr. Musk, you've been summoned to answer specific questions about data transfers that may affect federal communication protocols. I expect you to stay within the designated scope." Elon stood, nodding slightly, a gesture both respectful and daring. "I'm happy to testify, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady but sharp, honed by hours of inner debate. "Provided we all play by the same rules." A hush fell over the room. The judge frowned. "Meaning?" he asked, his tone edging upward with suspicion. Elon smiled. Not a polite smile, but the kind that said he'd just crossed a line his opponents didn't see coming. "Meaning," he replied, "if the law demands transparency, let's not apply it selectively just because someone's toes might get stepped on." The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling outward in waves no one could stop. The first 20 minutes unfolded as the court expected, dry, procedural, filled with vague exchanges about data environments, third-party access, and compliance variances. Elon answered briefly, precisely, but inside a fire smoldered. He knew they wanted him silent, bowing to nebulous phrases like national security. He hadn't come here to be their puppet. Then the moment arrived. Prosecutor Dana Kellerman rose, her posture sharp as a predator stalking prey. She was a seasoned lawyer, known for cornering even the slickest corporate executives. Today, her target was Musk, and she had no intention of letting him slip away. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice cutting like a knife, In communications with X-Corp employees, you referenced government overreach into content moderation. You then allowed independent auditors to view back-end logs. Would you consider that a national security risk? Elon met her gaze, unflinching. A memory flickered. Late nights in his office, poring over legal texts, pages of documents his team had unearthed from the government's dark corners. No, he said, his voice calm but firm as steel. I consider it transparency. Kellerman smirked, a flash of triumph crossing her face. Yet your team granted access to individuals not cleared by the federal government. That's a breach. Elon leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. His pulse beat steady, not from nerves, but from anticipation. This was the moment he'd waited for. Only if the classification was legal, he said. And under your own rules, classification can't be used to conceal violations of constitutional rights. The room stirred. Judge Bannister's brow furrowed, his voice stern. Are you implying the government uses classification to cover up unconstitutional behavior? Elon shrugged, not flippantly, but with the confidence of a man who held the truth. I'm not implying, Your Honor. I'm stating that your own policies allow me to raise that concern under Rule 6, Section B of the Federal Testimony Act, protecting whistleblower disclosures if they expose institutional abuse of authority. Kellerman froze. The judge narrowed his eyes, muttering, "That's a misinterpretation." But Elon pulled a highlighted copy from his folder. Page 42, Section B, Subsection 2, Clause 1 of the Federal Judiciary's Open Access Policy Manual, printed straight from their own website, marked in yellow and red. He handed it to the clerk. Testimony referencing classified information may proceed without redaction when exposing unconstitutional suppression of speech, per the Whistleblower Safeguard Amendment, he read aloud, his voice ringing like a hammer striking an anvil. Gasps rippled through the room. Kellerman stepped back. Judge Bannister blinked. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Your website," Elon replied, his tone light but cutting as a blade. "Next time, read the fine print." The silence was suffocating, thick with the weight of what had just happened. Judge Bannister, for the first time that day, looked uncertain. He cleared his throat, his voice quiet. "Then please continue, Mr. Musk." And just like that, the gate the court had tried to bolt shut swung wide open. Elon didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He adjusted his papers, looked up at the judge, and spoke with a precision that sliced through every syllable of legal decorum. "I'd like to read from an internal DHS memo our legal team received through a delayed FOIA release," he said. "It's relevant to this court's concern over platform access and national security." Kellerman objected instantly. "Your Honor, we weren't given advance notice of this exhibit." But Elon held up a stamped, declassified document. "It's been public for months, Your Honor. I'm sure transparency remains the court's priority." The judge waved for him to proceed. The room leaned forward, breathless. Certain private platforms, including Twitter, may be leveraged to reinforce coordinated narrative architecture via non-public federal partnerships, Elon read, his voice low but heavy with intent. Executive discretion may override First Amendment conflicts in matters of national cohesion. He paused, letting the words sink in. Inside, a chill ran through him, not from fear, but from the realization of their weight for millions beyond these walls. Override First Amendment conflicts, he repeated, softer, almost a whisper. That's not just unconstitutional. It's tyrannical. Murmurs spread through the gallery. Even the stenographer hesitated, as if double-checking her transcription. Kellerman tried to regain control. "Mr. Musk, surely you don't believe releasing that memo was justified under the guise of whistleblower protection?" Elon nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I do. Because when unelected officials start defining national cohesion as silencing citizens, that's not policy. That's censorship." Then he turned to the judge, his voice a final resounding blow. If the Constitution is inconvenient to your protocol, the problem isn't the speech, it's the system. The room erupted, not in sound, but in motion. Phones buzzed with live tweets. Newsrooms cut other segments. CNN flashed an emergency chyron. Musk turns hearing into First Amendment showdown. TikTok exploded with "Override First Amendment equals tyranny." Reddit's front page screamed, "Musk pulls court's own rulebook, drops redacted DHS memo." Judge Bannister leaned back, hands gripping the bench's edge. "And Mr. Musk?" he asked, his voice faintly unsteady. Elon took a calm sip from his water bottle. "Would the court like me to proceed to the next memo?" he asked, his tone gentle but laced with defiance. The question hung there, a spark in dry grass ready to ignite a wildfire. The judge didn't answer at first. He knew, as did everyone in the room, there was no turning back. "Proceed," he said quietly. Elon turned the page. This next document is an internal Slack transcript from a social media compliance liaison team created under the Disinformation Engagement Protocol by executive directive, he began, his voice dropping into a storyteller's cadence, drawing the room into a dark secret. It outlines requests from multiple federal agencies to suppress terms like natural immunity, Hunter Biden laptop, and vaccine injury, regardless of whether the posts were factually accurate. His words fell like heavy rain on parched earth. Inside, a cold resolve settled, not from what he read, but from knowing its impact on those who'd been silenced without realizing it. "The emails didn't say false," he continued, his voice lowering, nearly a whisper. "They said inconvenient." Kellerman leapt to her feet, her face flushed with anger and panic. "Your Honor, this is outside the scope of this testimony," she shouted, her voice shrill like a wounded bird. But Elon didn't break eye contact with the judge. "Your Honor," he said, steady and sharp, "the prosecution is asking me to justify my platform's refusal to comply with unconstitutional requests. These documents are my justification." The judge glanced at his clerk, then gave a single nod. Elon pressed on, his voice now a hammer striking steel. "Here's where it gets worse. When X-Corp delayed action on those requests, the White House Digital Strategy Director wrote, 'We need faster alignment, otherwise we escalate to regulatory pressure.'" The room didn't just go silent, it froze. Even those who'd come to see Musk fail couldn't look away, because what he revealed couldn't be unheard. Then he dropped the bombshell. That phrase, "escalate to regulatory pressure," was sent 48 hours before an antitrust inquiry was filed against SpaceX, he said, his voice low but resonant. Gasps echoed, uncontainable. The judge sat back, eyes wide with shock. Elon locked eyes with him. "You think this is about national security?" "No. This is about control. And the agencies claiming to defend liberty are now its greatest threat." The fire was out of the courtroom now, a blaze racing across social media, newsrooms, and the hearts of millions. TikTok flooded with "escalate to regulatory pressure" clips, racking up millions of views. A viral tweet read, "He didn't bring documents, he brought receipts and the audit trail." Podcasts roared, "Elon just proved what we feared. Free speech wasn't eroded, it was hunted." In a cramped apartment in suburban Philadelphia, a young journalist named Mia Carter sat hunched over her laptop, hands trembling as she typed. She was 26, hair pulled high, eyes shadowed from late nights at a small-town paper no one read. But today, she wasn't writing about car crashes or street fairs. She was writing about Elon Musk, a man she'd once dismissed as an eccentric billionaire with wild ideas. Now she saw him differently. Inside, fear and exhilaration churned. Fear of what he'd exposed. Exhilaration at knowing she was witnessing history. Mia had been censored before. An article she'd written about public health policies had vanished without explanation, her X account briefly locked. She'd suspected a hidden hand but had no proof. Now, hearing Musk read those DHS lines, her throat tightened. "They didn't say false. They said inconvenient," she muttered, fingers gripping her mouse. She typed faster, keys clacking like gunfire. Elon Musk didn't just speak the truth, he showed us how it's been buried. Meanwhile, at DHS headquarters in D.C., the atmosphere was taut as a bowstring. Senior officials huddled in a windowless room, blinds drawn tight. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses slammed his fist on the table. "Who let that memo slip?" he growled, voice hoarse with fury. "We said to stall the foyer." A woman by the door, clutching her phone, replied shakily, "Sir, it was declassified months ago. We didn't think Musk had it." The man spun around, eyes blazing. "Didn't think? How do you not think when a billionaire with an army of lawyers is digging through our closets? Now what? The whole country's watching us like we're tyrants." Inside, a deep dread clawed at him, not of Musk, but of what he'd unleashed. They'd built a delicate system of control, veiled in phrases like public safety and national cohesion. Now the curtain was torn, and sunlight, Musk's undefeated sunlight, was pouring into their darkest corners. Back in the courtroom, Kellerman and the prosecution scrambled. She whispered furiously to two aides while a DOJ liaison typed frantically on a tablet, searching for an exit. A clause, a technicality, anything to shut Musk down. But it was too late. The room wasn't with Musk because of charm or power. It was with him because he didn't speculate. He showed their own words, inked in black on white. Judge Bannister tried to restore order. "Mr. Musk," he said, voice stiff, "while your documents are troubling, we must remain within this proceedings framework. Explain how these disclosures pertain directly to the alleged breach of national protocol." Elon didn't blink. "I'll show you," he said, pulling out one final document, a signed letter from a former DHS whistleblower, time-stamped, notarized, verified by a House subcommittee. This letter confirms the so-called disinformation engagement protocol wasn't advisory. It was directive, meaning the government wasn't asking social media to censor, they were instructing. Gasps rang out again, raw and uncontainable. Kellerman stood. "Your Honor, this is grandstanding. We move to reimpose the gag." But Elon cut in, his voice ice-cold. "Under what rule? You tried that already, and I used your own statute to override it." He turned to the spectators, the press, his eyes ablaze. "Let me be clear. The court imposed a speech restriction to protect national security. I've now shown the biggest threat to national security was the silence you tried to force on me." Judge Bannister rubbed his temples, exhaustion etching his face. He knew, as did everyone, there was no walking this back. Truth had been spoken under oath, backed by their own doctrine. He cleared his throat, voice hoarse. "This court finds Mr. Musk's testimony admissible in full. Let the record show the scope was expanded, not by the witness, but by the facts." The courtroom emptied slowly, not because the hearing was over, it wasn't, but because no one knew what to do next. Judges, journalists, interns, rival attorneys drifted out in silence, reeling from what they'd seen. Elon Musk hadn't just spoken. He'd dismantled the system's muzzle with surgical precision, using their laws, their rules, their documents. Outside, cameras swarmed as Elon exited through the main doors, not a private corridor. He could have dodged the press. He didn't. A Reuters reporter thrust a mic toward him. "Mr. Musk, what do you say to claims you're risking national cohesion by airing this?" Elon stopped, staring into the lens, eyes burning like unquenchable fire. "You don't build national cohesion by silencing half the nation," he said, voice low but resonant. "You build it by trusting them with the truth." He walked away, leaving the words dangling. That 11-second clip hit 50 million views in hours. In Silicon Valley, CEOs texted in a frenzy. "Did you know about this?" one wrote. "Can we be forced to comply? What's our liability if we followed similar requests?" In D.C., two senators, one Democrat, one Republican, issued a joint statement. "If what Mr. Musk presented today is authentic, we're witnessing the weaponization of federal influence to control narrative flow. It must be investigated immediately. By nightfall, a third committee formed, focused solely on government-directed moderation, bipartisan in a rare unity. On social media, the public's response wasn't just outrage, it was validation. For millions labeled paranoid, conspiratorial, or anti-democratic for questioning vanishing stories, this was high-definition vindication. In a small Kentucky town, high school teacher Sarah Ellis stood before her whiteboard, chalk in hand. She wrote, "Sunlight remains undefeated." Turning to her class, her eyes gleamed with a long-lost emotion, hope. "Why do you think they tried to shut him up?" she asked. No one laughed. The answer was obvious. Sarah had once feared teaching about free speech. She'd seen colleagues fired for untimely questions. But today, she handed out Musk's testimony excerpts. She wanted her students to understand, not Musk, but what he defended. Inside, a small flame flickered, fragile but unextinguishable. In Texas, at a community event, a young man named Jake, 25, a mechanic, quiet, stood during Q&A. "I didn't vote for Musk. I don't follow tech," he said, voice rough with emotion. "But after what he did in that courtroom, I finally believe someone's willing to bleed truth in public." The crowd applauded, not from politics, but from a deeper relief. In D.C., Congress panicked. A leaked memo from a senior staffer read, "He didn't just embarrass us. He exposed that we've built systems assuming no one would challenge them this publicly or effectively." And Elon? He posted on X, "They're not afraid I lied. They're afraid I read their truth aloud." Days later, a high-ranking intelligence official off-record told The Intercept, "Musk didn't leak secrets. He showed how the system quietly classifies anything threatening the status quo that's more dangerous to them than any breach." The words went nuclear. Agencies scrambled to shield their reputations as congressional committees received dozens of whistleblower emails emboldened by Musk's stand. A week on, the Senate scheduled emergency hearings. State suppression of speech, legal boundaries, and digital freedoms. Elon wasn't there, but his presence loomed, on screens, in speeches, in questions. A senator opened, "Let's be honest. We wouldn't be here if Elon Musk hadn't walked into that courtroom and dropped the government's script on their own podium." Across the country, fear evaporated. Blacklisted indie journalists spoke freely again. Silenced doctors returned to podcasts. Tech platforms re-examined federal trust and safety partnerships. A leaked Slack from a major video platform read, "We need to re-examine all content flagging mechanisms. If this goes further, we could be legally exposed." Elon posted one line that week, "The First Amendment is not a suggestion. No hashtags, no links." It hit 60 million impressions in hours. 2 weeks later, the Department of Justice quietly closed 2 inquiries into Musk's companies. No charges, no releases, just silence. The kind institutions use when caught not just failing, but manipulating. Congress drafted the Digital Bill of Rights. Its opening clause, "No U.S. government agency shall directly or indirectly request, coerce, or compel private entities to suppress constitutionally protected speech." It passed committee with unanimous bipartisan support, a decade first. On the streets, students quoted Musk in debates. Veterans played his testimony at assemblies. Plumbers, teachers, truck drivers spoke aloud what they'd once whispered. If the Constitution is inconvenient to your protocol, the problem isn't the speech, it's the system. The words were etched on 2 university walls, 3 courthouses, and a new civil liberties nonprofit's entryway in Austin. Elon didn't brag. He didn't celebrate. On the hearing's anniversary, he posted, "They asked me to lower my voice. I read their rules instead." That line, like the fire he'd lit, kept burning. And so, what began as a closed-door formality ended as a quiet revolution. Not with rage or rebellion, but with a man who read their rules and made them follow them. In doing so, he reminded a nation that liberty isn't a luxury. It's law.
In a courthouse cold, where shadows creep, heavy doors swing shut, secrets meant to keep. One man walks in, no armor, no disguise, just a spark of truth burning in his eyes. Gray suit, no tie, he's 3 steps ahead, carrying words the silence dread. They built their walls, they wrote their chains, thought they'd bury light in a storm of claims. But he held their rules, turned their game around. One voice, one truth, shook the ground. Sunlight undefeated, it's breaking through. Whispers of the brave, now the world's in view. No cage can hold what's meant to be free. Truth's the fire that's rewriting history. Oh, sunlight undefeated, it won't fade away. One spark, one stand, lights the darkest day. They called it law, but it wore a mask, hid the chains in shadows they wouldn't ask. He read their words, their memos, their lies, laid bare the cost of a nation's disguise. Override the truth, he said with a spark, that's not just wrong, it's tearing the heart. The judge looked down, the room held its breath, as courage walked where fear met death. No shout, no roar, just a steady hand, turn their own rules to free the land. Sunlight undefeated, it's breaking through. Whispers of the brave, now the world's in view. No cage can hold what's meant to be free. Truth's the fire that's rewriting history. Oh, sunlight undefeated, it won't fade away. One spark, one stand, lights the darkest day. From a small town writer to a classroom's dream, from silenced hearts to a rising stream. The fire he lit, it's spreading wide. No corner left for the truth to hide. They feared his voice, but not his lies, 'cause he showed the world what they can't deny. Sunlight undefeated, it's breaking through. Whispers of the brave, now the world's in view. No cage can hold what's meant to be free. Truth's the fire that's rewriting history. Oh, sunlight undefeated, it won't fade away. One spark, one stand, lights the darkest day. Silence roam, sunlight's undefeated, it's calling us home. Oh, sunlight undefeated, it's here to stay. One man, one truth, showed the world the way.